The wind rattled the old windows of the coffee shop, as if trying to remind Henry Walker that time didn't stop for anyone. He sat quietly in the farthest booth, hunched over a chipped mug of black coffee. The corner seat, the one next to the pie window. It had always been his favorite. From there he could still see the lot where his carpentry shop once stood, now just a dull grey building with fluorescent lights and a blinking "For Lease" sign. He hadn't stepped inside that building in 25 years. Not since the day he closed the doors for good and locked away a lifetime of memories. That day haunted him. That decision, it nearly broke him. What kind of man sells his life's work, his legacy, his only source of income? A father. A desperate father who believed in two small girls with wide eyes and impossible dreams. It was a Thursday. He remembered it like it was yesterday, the way the dust danced in the morning light through the slats in the woodshop. The smell of oak, sweat, and coffee. He had just finished a rocking chair for an elderly couple who'd been coming to him for decades, the last piece he would ever make there. Emma and Olivia had been accepted into one of the top aviation programs in the country. Scholarships only covered so much. Tuition, uniforms, books, housing. It was more than he could afford. Much more. He could have said no. Could have told them it was too much, that girls from small towns like theirs didn't fly planes. But he saw it. The fire in their eyes, the passion, the belief that the sky wasn't the limit, it was the goal. So he sold the shop, every tool, every lathe, every bench he had built with his bare hands. He kept only the first hammer his father gave him, the one with the initials HW carved into the handle. "Don't look back," he'd whispered to himself that day. "This is for them." And he didn't, not for a long time. But now, sitting in that booth, stirring coffee that had long gone cold, Henry felt the weight of silence settle over him. He hadn't heard from Emma and Olivia in years. Life had pulled them further away with each passing mile, each passing flight, each unanswered letter. Still, every Thursday, he came here. Same time, same seat, same hope. He glanced at the waitress. Her name tag said Tina, but he missed Rose, the old one who used to ask about his girls. Tina just refilled his coffee without a word. No one really asked anymore. Then the bell above the door jingled. Henry didn't look up at first, but something felt different. A change in the air. He turned. A little boy with messy blonde hair ran in, dragging a wooden airplane on a string. His laughter echoed in the quiet cafe. Henry's chest tightened. He remembered the night he carved 2 toy planes out of pine wood, one for each daughter. They had hugged him so tight he thought his heart would burst. "What would you do," he whispered to no one, "if you gave up everything?" And never got to see how the story ends. He blinked hard, swallowed the lump in his throat, and looked back out the window. The lot across the street sat empty, quiet, cold, but somewhere beyond the horizon. Maybe, just maybe, 2 girls were flying. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Long before they ever saw an airplane up close, Emma and Olivia Walker believed they could fly. They were only 5 when they first said it out loud. It was summer in Ohio, and their backyard was a field of overgrown grass, dandelions, and crooked fence lines. The sky above stretched wide and blue, like it was daring someone to come touch it. That day Henry found them standing on the roof of the shed, arms stretched out like wings, giggling like fools. "I told you not to climb up there," he yelled, trying not to laugh. "We're flying, Daddy," Emma shouted. "We're pilots," Olivia added, eyes squinting into the sun. He had to climb up there and carry them both down. They fought him the whole way. He didn't know it then, but that was the first time they said it, the first time they truly believed it was possible. Henry had been raising them alone since they were 3. Their mother, Claire, passed after. A long battle with cancer, and Henry, broken, grieving, and scared, had to become both parents overnight. He didn't have a lot. The carpentry shop barely paid the bills, and nights were often lit by candles because electricity came second to food. But what he lacked in money, he gave in love. He cooked every meal, packed every lunch, read every bedtime story. He taught them to fix things, to be brave, to ask questions. He showed them what it meant to be grounded, even when their heads were in the clouds. The twins were different, but they moved like one. Emma was the logical one, a thinker, precise, the kind of kid who always finished her homework early and corrected your grammar. Olivia was the dreamer, a bit of a hurricane, always sketching things in the margins of her notebook and asking what if, more than why. But they shared one thing: obsession with planes. It started with a book from the library about Amelia Earhart, then a science fair project where they built a cardboard cockpit out of moving boxes and took turns being captain and co-pilot. Then came the drawings, the journal entries, the binder full of printed-out scholarship flyers. They studied in the garage while Henry worked on cabinets. They read flight manuals instead of fashion magazines. They aced every math and science test, not because it was easy, but because failure was never an option. One night, when they were 16, they sat with Henry under the porch light. "I think we're ready to apply," Emma said softly. "To where?" he asked, sanding down a stool. "The Aviation Academy in Colorado," Olivia said. "It's one of the top programs in the country." Henry put down the sandpaper. His hands were cracked, stained with sawdust. He stared at them. "You know. That's expensive, right?" "We've been looking into financial aid," Emma added quickly. "Some of it's covered. We just need help with the rest." Henry looked at them. Two girls who still wore hand-me-down jackets, who still helped wash dishes after every meal, who never asked for more than what they needed, and now they were asking for the sky. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. But that night, while they slept, he pulled out the old box of Claire's things from the attic. Her photo sat on top. He stared at it a long time. "You always said they'd change the world," he whispered. "Guess it's time I believe it too." From that night on, things shifted. Henry started closing the shop earlier. He stopped taking new clients. He stopped fixing things around the house unless they were falling apart completely. The girls noticed, but didn't ask why. One morning he woke them up early. Still in their pajamas, he drove them to a diner halfway across town. He handed them 2 envelopes across the table. Inside were acceptance letters and tuition deposit receipts. "You're going," he said. "No more talking about it. You're really going," Emma cried first. Olivia tried to hold it together, then failed completely. But how? Emma started. Henry smiled gently. "You let me worry about that." They didn't find out he'd sold the shop until months later. He never let them see the tears that came after. He didn't just send them to school. He launched them into the sky, and he did it with calloused hands, a quiet heart, and a belief that love means letting go, even when it tears you in half. The morning Henry sold the shop, the sky was grey, not stormy, just heavy. Like it knew something sacred was ending. He stood in front of the building for nearly an hour before he could bring himself to unlock the front door. The same door he'd passed through every day for 30 years. The wood had worn soft at the edges, shaped by the gentle touch of a craftsman's hands. Inside, the smell of cedar and varnish clung to the air, the kind of smell that lingered in his clothes, in his skin, in his bones. It was the smell of pride, of purpose. Today it smelled like goodbye. Henry walked slowly through the shop. His fingers grazed the workbench, the wall of hand tools. Every chisel, every mallet, each one in its place like soldiers standing at attention. His father had taught him the order of things. A tidy shop makes for tidy work. He could hear the old man's voice echoing off the wood-panelled walls. He paused in front of the tall cabinet at the back. Inside were the templates he'd made over the years. Cribs, chairs, tables, even a few custom pieces for the town's mayor once. The twin rocking chairs he carved the winter Claire got sick were still there, wrapped in dusty sheets. He sat in one of them, let it creak gently beneath him. He could have rebuilt, started over somewhere smaller, worked part-time, but he knew it wasn't just about the money. It was about time, the time his girls needed to chase their future. The kind of time he never got with his own father. The buyer arrived at 11:15 a.m. sharp, a young man in a tailored jacket, city accent, and expensive shoes. Said he planned to convert it into a modern studio space for local artists. Henry nodded, pretended it didn't sting. The paperwork was quick. The handshake was firm. By noon, the shop was no longer his. He locked the door one final time, slid the key into an envelope, and left it in the buyer's hand. But before he walked away, he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small cloth bundle. Inside was an old hammer, its wooden handle smoothed by years of use with faded initials carved near the grip. H.W., his father's hammer. His hammer. The only thing he didn't sell. Back home, the silence hit him harder than he expected. He made himself a sandwich he didn't finish, turned on the radio and turned it right back off. Every corner of the house whispered memories. Claire's laugh from the kitchen, Emma and Olivia arguing over whose turn it was to take the trash. Out, the squeak of sneakers in the hallway. It wasn't just a shop he'd let go, it was everything that grounded him. Everything that made him feel like he still had a place in the world. But he never told his daughters that. When they called, always short, always between classes, he just asked about their day, about the planes, about how much they were learning. He told them he was doing fine, that business was slow but steady. He didn't mention the part-time work at the hardware store, or the nights he sat in the dark because he was too tired to pay the electric bill, or the missed mortgage payments. He didn't want their wings to be weighed down by guilt. One evening, about a month after they left, he found himself wandering into the garage. It was empty now. No workbench, no shavings on the floor, no tools. Lined up on the walls, just him and a box of old photo albums. He flipped through pages. Emma's first day of school. Olivia dressed like a pilot for Halloween. The three of them at the county fair, cotton candy stuck to their faces. He laughed. Then he cried, and when the tears dried, he whispered to the stillness, "I did the right thing." Right? Letting go wasn't a single moment. It was 1,000 small ones. Every time he passed by the lot where his shop used to be, every time he got a letter from the school with an invoice attached, every time he picked up an extra shift. But he'd made his choice. He gave up everything, for the chance that his daughters might touch the sky. He just hadn't expected how far away that sky would feel without them. The morning the girls left for Colorado, the air was still. Not quiet, still. The kind of stillness that makes the world feel like it's holding its breath. Henry was up before dawn. He stood at the kitchen counter, pouring pancake batter into a pan that had seen better days. The smell of burnt edges filled the kitchen, but it didn't matter, it was tradition. He'd made pancakes for them on every first day of school since kindergarten, even when the milk was powdered, even when the only topping they had was plain sugar. Today was no different, except everything was. Emma came downstairs first, dragging her suitcase behind her. She looked calm on the outside, her shoulders squared, her dark hair pulled into a tight braid, but Henry could see her hands fidgeting with the strap of her backpack. Olivia followed a few minutes later, blinking. Sleep from her eyes, curls bouncing with every step. Her suitcase had stickers on it already, little decals of planes, stars, and a faded quote that read, "She believed she could, so she did." "Pancakes?" Olivia asked, smiling. "Tradition," Henry said, flipping one with a small shrug. "Can't break it now." They sat at the table in silence, chewing slowly, like stretching time between bites might keep them home longer. Henry kept glancing at the clock, 6:45 a.m. The train left at 8 sharp. Olivia reached for the syrup, then paused. "Are you okay, Dad?" He looked up. Her eyes were so much like Claire's, it knocked the wind out of him for a second. "I'm proud," he said simply. And maybe just a little terrified. They all laughed, and softly, like they knew if they laughed too hard it would break the moment wide open. At 7:15 they loaded the car. Henry tied the suitcases down in the back of the old truck, making sure nothing would shift on the bumpy road to the station. Before he got in the driver's seat, he walked to the garage. The girls watched from the truck window as he disappeared inside. A few minutes later he returned holding a long cloth-wrapped object. It was about the size of a violin case. He placed it gently in Emma's lap. "I made it the week after you got your letters," he said, clearing his throat. "Open it when you get to your dorms, not before." Olivia reached for it too, but he wagged a finger at them. "Together, promise me." They nodded. The drive to the station felt both endless and far too short. Fields rolled past the windows, golden and green like memory. Henry gripped the wheel a little tighter at every mile marker. He didn't say much, didn't need to. When they reached the platform, the train was already idling, engine humming. The conductor waved passengers aboard. A voice over the loudspeaker called out destinations: Denver, Colorado Springs, Fort Collins. Henry helped lift the bags onto the platform. His hands moved slowly, as if by dragging his feet he could buy another minute, maybe two. The girls stood on either side of him. Olivia was bouncing on her heels. Emma looked like she might cry. "Hey," he said, pulling them both into a tight hug. "You've got this. I raised you tough. I raised you right. You raised us brave," Emma whispered into his shoulder. "And kind," Olivia added. Henry stepped back, his voice thick. "Whatever you do up there, wherever this takes you, just don't forget where you came from." "We won't," they said in unison, like they had since they were little. The train whistle blew. They climbed aboard, waving from the window. Henry didn't move. He stood rooted to the platform as the train pulled away, growing smaller, then gone. Back home, he walked into the girls' empty room. 2 beds, perfectly made. The lamp between them still glowing softly. He'd left it on, maybe hoping they'd turn around and come back. He sat down at the edge of one bed and stared at the floor. In the quiet, a single thought settled in his mind like dust. They're really gone. But just beneath that ache was something warmer. Hope. They were gone, but they were going somewhere. And that meant something bigger than grief. That night, Henry sat on the porch with Claire's photo beside him. The stars were out, bright and scattered. "You'd be proud of them," he whispered. And maybe, just maybe, he imagined her smiling back. The first letter came exactly 9 days after the train left. It was written on lined notebook paper, folded neatly into a blue envelope, and tucked in Henry's rusty mailbox between a stack of unpaid utility bills and a flyer for lawn services he couldn't afford. The handwriting on the front stopped him cold. Tight, careful, unmistakably Emma's. He carried it inside like it was made of glass. "Dear Dad, we made it. The ride was long, but the view as we got close to Colorado, you'd have loved it. Mountains that looked like they belonged in paintings. The sun hit them in a way that made the sky feel closer, like you could reach out and grab a handful of clouds. Campus is, wow, huge. Organized chaos. Everyone walks around in uniforms. Everyone looks serious, but I think we belong here, I really do. Olivia made 3 friends before we even unpacked. One of them wants to be an astronaut. Typical Liv, already recruiting a crew for her spaceship. Me, I'm trying to keep us organized. Schedules, dorm lists, meal plans. We've got an orientation next week and our first real simulator class the week after that. I'm nervous, but also excited, like deeply. I can't stop thinking about you when I'm here. Every time I see a piece of machinery or smell oil and leather in the hangar, I think of your hands, calloused and sure, building things from nothing. You taught us to hold tools. Now we're learning to hold flight controls. Thank you for everything. We'll make you proud. Love always, Emma. Henry read it 3 times. By the 4th, he had to sit down. He hadn't realized how badly he needed to hear from them. To know they were okay, more than okay. They were becoming. Olivia's letter arrived 3 days later. Hers came on the back of a postcard with a sketch of a fighter jet flying over the Rockies. "Yo, Dad, it's me, your favorite twin." Okay, so first, this place is insane. I touched an actual cockpit, like sat in it. I don't think my heart stopped racing for 10 minutes. Second, I'm the worst at marching in line, seriously. Emma keeps trying to coach me, but I almost tripped into a guy named Brandon, and now he calls me Torpedo. Third, we opened the gift. Dad, what the hell? That was too much. Translation, it was perfect, like painfully perfect. I sleep with it under my bed now. Just knowing you made that, it makes this place feel less scary. More like home. I'm not gonna lie, I miss you like crazy. But I also love it here. I promise we're not wasting this shot you gave us. Give the garden gnome on the porch a nod from me. Your daughter, the soon-to-be flying maniac, Olivia. Henry laughed out loud at that last line. The first time laughter had come easy in weeks, but then he cried. And not the quiet, tear-down-the-cheek kind. This was full-on, breath-shaking, soul-emptying grief, mixed with pride. They were okay. More than okay. They were thriving. He pulled out the cloth-wrapped package from under the counter. The one he'd given them. Inside had been a hand-carved model airplane, shaped from cherry wood, polished to a deep mahogany shine. A single word etched into the wings, together, because no matter where life took them, that's how they'd started, and how he hoped they'd always be. In the weeks that followed, the letters kept coming. Emma wrote about her professors, one ex-Air Force, another who'd flown commercial for 25 years. Olivia wrote about flight drills, emergency simulations, how she threw up during her first spin test but still managed to laugh through it. Every word felt like a string, tugging Henry out of his loneliness. Every envelope reminded him he hadn't lost them. He'd simply set them free. But not every letter was sunshine and smooth skies. The 6th letter from Emma didn't begin with "Dear Dad." It didn't even start with her usual neat handwriting. The pen strokes were rushed, uneven, almost shaky. I don't know how to say this, but today broke me a little. Henry sat down at the kitchen table, heart in his throat, the letter trembling slightly in his calloused hands. We were in the simulator for final solo check-offs. Everything was fine, until it wasn't. My landing was off by 4 degrees. Not catastrophic, but enough that the instructor pulled me aside after and said, "You don't have the instincts yet." It felt like he wasn't just talking about today. It felt like he meant I wasn't born for this, and that cut deeper than I expected. I've been pushing so hard, Dad, studying past midnight, skipping meals, taking notes on every flight briefing. I thought I was doing everything right, but now I keep hearing that voice, the one that says maybe we're just the daughters of a carpenter from Ohio, and maybe this dream was too big all along. I don't want to let you down. I'm sorry. Henry exhaled slowly, pressing his hand against the letter like he could reach through the page and steady her shoulders. The next letter from Olivia came 2 days later. Dad, Emma won't say this out loud, but she's been off. She barely talks between classes. She's pulling away, and it's scaring me. I messed up my radio call during our navigation drill. I panicked and reversed coordinates. The instructor just stared at me like I'd dropped a grenade in the cockpit. I laughed it off. You know, me. But that night I sat in the stairwell for an hour just staring at my boots, wondering if I belonged here. Everyone here is brilliant. Some of them have pilots in the family. One girl's dad flies commercial jets. Another's uncle was in NASA. We've got you. And don't get me wrong, you're everything. But sometimes I wonder if people here think we're too small town, too ordinary, too blue-collar for this sky. I keep thinking about that rocking chair you carved when Mom got sick. You said, "When your hands shake, keep building," so we're going to keep building, even if we're scared, even if we mess up. But man, Dad, this is hard. Henry sat on the porch that night watching the sky. He hadn't cried this much in years. But it wasn't weakness, and it was love, raw and real. His daughters were being tested, not just on skills, but on belief. The belief he'd built into them, nail by nail, word by word, morning by morning. The next morning he got up early, earlier than he had in weeks. He packed a small box with 2 things, a photo of the 3 of them from their last Christmas together, the girls in matching flannel, him in a Santa hat far too small for his head, and the original blueprint for that cherry wood model plane. Hand-sketched, with 1 note in his handwriting across the top. Perfect doesn't fly. Persistence does. He mailed it that afternoon, first class. A week later, Olivia wrote back, "Dad!" The box made Emma cry. Then I cried. Then we laughed at each other for crying. She taped your quote above her bunk. We're still here, still showing up, still reaching for the sky, even when it tilts. You didn't raise quitters. You raised flyers, just thought you should know. Not every flight is smooth. Not every pilot feels ready. But Henry knew something they hadn't learned yet. Rough air means you're climbing. They said nothing compares to your first time in the cockpit with the engine humming beneath you. And they were right. For Emma and Olivia, the moment came 6 months into the program. The briefing had been short. The instructor, a retired Navy pilot named Lieutenant Barnes, barked out instructions in clipped phrases and hard stares. You've trained. You've practiced. Today we see if you can fly." Emma felt it in her chest like thunder. Olivia bounced on her heels, adrenaline coiled like springs in her calves. Two bright white Cessna 172s gleamed on the runway, wings catching the sunlight like silver knives. It wasn't a fighter jet. It wasn't a commercial beast, but it was theirs. Today Emma stepped into the first plane. Olivia into the second. "Ready?" The instructor's voice crackled in the headset. Emma stared down the runway. "Always." The engine came alive with a roar. The vibration shook her bones, but her hands stayed steady on the yoke. She ran through the checklist, just as she'd practiced: flaps, fuel, throttle, brakes, gauges. Everything locked into place like a puzzle she was born to solve. Cessna 541X requesting taxi clearance. Cleared for takeoff, 541X. Winds calm. You're good to go. The wheels rolled forward. Her heart nearly exploded. Across the tarmac, Olivia was already in the air. She whooped into her headset the second she left the ground. "Woo! We're flying, baby!" Forgetting for a moment, she was on an open channel. The tower responded with a dry, "Maintain professionalism 293B, but Lieutenant Barnes chuckled. "You'll be lucky if she ever stops yelling," Emma muttered to herself, smiling. Then she hit throttle and the world peeled away. As the plane lifted, Emma felt it. The shift. That unexplainable rush that pilots talk about. The second the wheels leave Earth and your stomach flips and suddenly you're not held down anymore. Her doubts drowned in engine noise. Her fear burned up at 3,000 feet. Her purpose crystal clear. She looked to her left and saw Olivia in the distance, her plane banking gracefully into a turn. They weren't just twins. They were twin streaks in the sky now. After an hour of maneuvers, touch-and-go landings, and straight flight patterns, the girls were directed to head back to base. Emma made her approach slow and steady. Olivia, of course, came in just a little too hot, but corrected beautifully at the last second. When their feet hit the tarmac again, they both dropped to their knees next to the planes and just breathed. "We did it," Olivia whispered. "No," Emma said, her face calm but glowing. "We started it." That night they called home for the first time in weeks. Henry picked up on the first ring. "We flew," Emma said. Just 2 words, but her voice carried galaxies. "You flew," Henry repeated, choking up. "We flew, Dad, we flew so high." Henry sat in his living room, clutching the phone like it was a lifeline. The TV was off. The house was quiet. But in that one call, everything lit up. Later that night, Henry pulled out a faded map from the bottom drawer of his writing desk, the one Claire used to use for her travel dreams. He traced a line from Ohio to Colorado with his finger. "They're not far," he said aloud, even though they were over 1,000 miles away. "They're flying home one day, I can feel it. But soaring doesn't last forever, and fire, no matter how bright, must be fueled again and again, because just over the horizon life was waiting with another test, one they couldn't see coming. It was Olivia who got the call first. She'd just finished a night navigation simulation, still sweating under her flight suit, when her phone lit up in the locker room. Unknown number. Area code. Ohio. She hesitated before answering. Then, "Is this Miss Olivia Walker?" "Yes." "We're calling from Mercy County Hospital. How your father's been admitted." The world slowed. Everything after that came in pieces: chest pain, lightheadedness, a neighbor who saw him collapse outside the hardware store, ambulance, ER, observation, stable, but not out of the woods. Emma found Olivia sitting on the dorm steps, phone in hand, tears streaming silently down her face. "I need you to breathe," Emma said gently, kneeling beside her. What happened? And when Olivia told her, something shifted between them. Not panic, not fear, instinct. That night, they sat across from Lieutenant Barnes in his cramped office. Emma clutched her dad's hospital report printout. Olivia hadn't let go of her phone since the call. "We need a leave of absence," Emma said plainly. Barnes leaned back in his chair. "How long?" "We don't know," Olivia said. "We just know we can't be here while he's in a hospital bed." There was a long pause. "You're halfway through phase 2. You leave now, it'll set you back 6 months minimum. You sure about this?" They didn't hesitate. "Family comes first," Emma said. 2 days later, they were back in Ohio. The house looked smaller, sadder, the grass overgrown, the porch light flickering. The air smelled like dust and unfinished time, but inside him, in a hospital bed tucked into the living room, was Henry. He blinked when they walked in, confused at first. Then his breath caught in his throat. "Girls?" "Surprise," Olivia said through a teary grin. "You're not supposed to be here," he whispered, trying to sit up. "What about school?" "School can wait," Emma said, gently easing him back. "You can't." The doctors were hopeful. It was a mild cardiac episode, likely brought on by exhaustion, high blood pressure, and the fact that Henry had been working 2 jobs without telling anyone. "I was fine," he muttered. "You were alone," Olivia said, trying not to cry. Again. "There's a difference." They set up a rotation. Emma handled the meds and doctor appointments. Olivia managed meals and house repairs. They slept in their childhood beds again, the same faded posters on the walls, the same creaky nightstand between them. They weren't cadets here. They were daughters. Days passed. Then weeks. Henry improved faster than expected. He cracked jokes, told stories. Sometimes when he didn't know they were listening, he'd sit on the porch with Claire's photo and hum old songs she used to love. But Emma and Olivia couldn't help noticing how thin he'd gotten, how tired, how he kept his toolbox packed, away like he didn't trust his hands anymore. One night, as Olivia was fixing a cabinet hinge in the kitchen, she said what they'd both been thinking. "We can't leave him again, can we?" Emma looked up from the table where she was reviewing their flight manuals for the 100th time. Her voice was low. "Not yet. But dreams are tricky things. They don't vanish. They just wait." And one night Henry called them into the living room. He had something in his lap, the model plane they'd left behind. "I didn't raise you to build your life around me," he said softly. "You're recovering." Emma started. "I'll recover faster if I know you're chasing what I gave everything for." Olivia knelt beside him. "You're sure?" He smiled. "I sold my shop so you could fly. Don't make me regret giving you wings." They hugged him tight. No one said anything for a long time, but the next day 2 tickets were booked back to Colorado. Departure Sunday. Destination, the sky. It was harder than they'd thought, picking up where they'd left off. The campus at Mile High Aviation Academy felt like a distant dream when they arrived back. The bright hangars, the polished planes, the buzz of eager students. It was all so familiar, but something was off. They were different now, and so was everything around them. The first day back in class was a reality check. Lieutenant Barnes was waiting at the briefing room door with a clipboard in hand, his expression unreadable. He took one look at Olivia and Emma as they walked in and then nodded. "You two sure you're ready for this?" Olivia swallowed hard. The weight of the words felt like a test. "We're here," Emma said firmly. "Let's get started." But the rest of the day was tougher than they expected. Flying was second nature, but their minds were cluttered with worry. Lieutenant Barnes didn't go easy on them. Their landings weren't as smooth as before, their timing off. He pushed them harder than ever. "You're behind," he said bluntly, "and I can see it. I need you to work faster, sharper. I don't want to hear excuses." Later, alone in their dorm room, Emma sank into the chair, rubbing her face. "Thought it would be easier to come back." "It's like we're starting over," Olivia agreed, tossing her flight suit onto the bed. "Everything feels different." Emma stared at the old photograph of their dad on the desk, the one that always sat in their room back home, him holding the model plane, smiling proudly. "He never said it'd be easy." "No," Olivia said quietly, walking over and picking up the photo. "He said it would be worth it." By the end of the week, the twins were exhausted. They woke up early. They stayed late at the flight simulators. They drilled maneuvers, studied maps, and ran checklists until their brains felt like they'd short-circuited. But something shifted. The fog of doubt began to clear. They found their rhythm. Emma's first solo flight after returning felt like a rebirth. She couldn't explain it, but the sky felt bigger now. She wasn't just flying. She was chasing every ounce of freedom that had ever called to her. It felt right. She had purpose again. Olivia followed suit, pushing herself harder. Faster, better. The doubt was still there, lurking in the back of her mind. But she refused to let it control her. They were still the girls from Ohio, but they were pilots now. On the final day of their first week back, they met up in the hangar after their flight. The day was clear, the mountains in the distance still, snow-capped, the air crisp with autumn. "You feeling it yet?" Olivia asked, stretching her arms out as the sun began to set. Emma grinned, her eyes shining with a quiet confidence. "Yeah, I think I'm finally home." As they stood there, side by side, the sound of another engine revved up in the distance. It was a familiar noise, the unmistakable hum of a plane preparing for takeoff. "I'll get there," Olivia said, watching the plane rise into the sky. "Just gotta take it one flight at a time." Emma clapped her on the back. "And when we get there, we'll be ready." The sky stretched out above them, wide, endless, inviting. They'd come back to where they belonged, but this time, they weren't just reaching for the stars. They were ready to fly with them. The opportunity came sooner than they expected. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a grand Boeing jet with hundreds of passengers. But it was a big deal. Their first commercial flight. The company called it a trial run, and Emma and Olivia jumped at the chance. They had their licenses, their certifications, and now they had the rare chance to fly an actual plane on a real route. A Cessna Caravan, a small regional aircraft, was the vessel for their first joint venture. 2 pilots, 1 plane. A small, intimate journey. The day began like any other. Early morning briefing with their flight coordinator, followed by a pre-flight check. Everything looked good. Weather was clear. The passengers, just a few business. Professionals and tourists were already seated. For Emma, this was a dream come true. She slid into the captain's seat, fingers brushing over the control panel with reverence. "Here we go," she said, cracking a grin at Olivia, who was sitting next to her. Olivia laughed. "We've got this." Takeoff was flawless. The plane lifted smoothly, the engines humming in perfect harmony. The small but steady motion of the Caravan made it feel like a cozy home in the sky. It wasn't a jet, but it didn't need to. The thrill of flying, of being in control, filled the cockpit with the kind of energy they hadn't felt in a long time. They flew over the mountains, the sun rising behind them, casting a golden glow over the vast expanse of land. It was breathtaking, the kind of beauty that made the entire struggle worth it. For the first hour, everything was perfect. The route was straightforward. They were in constant communication with air traffic control. Olivia handled the navigation, while Emma piloted the aircraft with precision. They even joked a little, their old twin camaraderie making its way back into the cockpit, filling the air with laughter. "This is it," Olivia said, scanning the charts. "We're living the dream." Emma smiled, eyes focused ahead. "We're just getting started." But then, halfway through the flight, something happened. A strange, subtle vibration began to reverberate through the aircraft. At first, it was barely noticeable, but it grew. Thrum, thrum, thrum. Emma's brow furrowed as she adjusted the throttle, checking the gauges. "Do you feel that?" she asked, her voice tight. Olivia looked up from her charts, her eyes narrowing in concern. "Yeah, it's coming from the right wing. Could be a mechanical issue." Emma flicked on the autopilot. "Okay, let's check the systems." But the vibration grew more intense, and now there was a faint buzzing noise coming from the left engine. Olivia was already pulling out the emergency checklist. "We might have an engine malfunction." Emma took a deep breath. "Let's stay calm, we've trained for this." Minutes felt like hours. The plane's vibration intensified, the buzzing getting louder. The altitude began to drop slightly, and Emma knew it was time to make a decision. "Olivia, I'm going to switch off autopilot and bring us down to a safe altitude. We need to find a place to land." Olivia nodded quickly, her hands steady as she continued monitoring the systems. "I'm with you, Emma. We can do this." They were a team. They always had been. And now, more than ever, they needed each other. Emma banked the aircraft to the right, cutting across the wind as she scanned the terrain below them. The flat fields were stretching out, but there was no runway in sight. "We'll have to do an emergency landing," Emma said, her voice calm but her heart pounding. "Find a field, any field." Olivia's eyes darted across the landscape, searching desperately for a spot. "There." She pointed to a patch of green near a small farm, barely big enough to fit the plane. "That's our best shot." Emma locked her gaze on the field. adjusting the plane's descent. She spoke softly, as if speaking to herself as much as to, "Olivia, we've got this." The next few minutes were a blur of adrenaline. Olivia worked the radio, informing air traffic control of their emergency landing, while Emma fought to keep the plane steady as it descended. Every adjustment felt like a gamble, but Emma knew what she was doing. She trusted herself, she trusted Olivia. The wheels touched down on the dirt field with a jolt. It wasn't the smoothest landing, but it was controlled. They came to a stop, the engines humming in the quiet aftermath. The moment stretched out, just a heartbeat of stillness. "Nice landing, Captain," Olivia said, breathing a sigh of relief. Emma glanced over, her face pale but relieved. "Thanks. We did it, didn't we?" Olivia grinned. "We sure did." As they sat there in the cockpit catching their breath, they realized something. Their journey wasn't just about flying planes. It was about knowing that no matter what happened, they would always have each other and their skills. They'd made it. Together. Later, as they were safely back on the ground, the team gathered to inspect the aircraft. It turned out the malfunction was due to a malfunctioning sensor in the right engine. A simple fix, but one that could have been catastrophic if they hadn't acted fast. "Great job up there, girls," their supervisor, Captain Miller, said with a proud smile. "You kept your heads, you stayed calm, and you made it happen. That's what I want from my pilots." Emma and Olivia exchanged a look. They'd earned their place in the sky. The call came on a Tuesday. It was Captain Miller, his voice a mix of excitement and gravity. "Olivia, Emma, I need you two in my office now." The twins had been flying non-stop for weeks now. Every flight felt like a step closer to their dream, but also a test of their limits. Yet, when they walked into Captain Miller's office that day, they had no idea what awaited them. He sat behind his desk, a serious look on his face as he motioned for them to sit down. "Congratulations, girls. You've both made it to the next level." He paused, watching them carefully. "You've been selected for a first officer position with the West Coast Airlines fleet. You're going to be co-piloting on a route. This is a huge deal, bigger planes, bigger responsibility." Emma and Olivia stared at each other, speechless for a second. This was everything they had been working for. This was the moment they had been dreaming of since they were kids. Captain Miller leaned forward. "There's just one catch." Their hearts skipped a beat. "You'll need to relocate to San Francisco for the next 6 months, he continued. "This will involve a lot of travel, more intensive training. It'll be a tough transition, but I know you're both ready. The thing is," his voice softened a little, "it's a big commitment, and there are only 2 spots available. The room seemed to spin for a moment as they processed the news. Relocate? Leave Colorado? But the dream was right here, wasn't it? They had been so close. Their father's health had improved, but they hadn't forgotten what they had left behind. Their roots, their purpose. "Captain," Olivia spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. "What happens if we don't take the offer?" Captain Miller's expression softened. "You'll still have a job here and you'll still be flying. But this is the kind of opportunity you don't get every day. This could be your stepping stone to a captain's seat one day." Emma and Olivia exchanged a look. There was so much weighing on this decision, but there was one thing they both knew for sure. They had come this far for a reason. They had promised their father they would make it. They had promised themselves that they would rise no matter the cost. Emma finally spoke, her voice steady. "We'll take it." Olivia nodded. "We're in." That night, the twins sat on the porch of their house in Colorado, watching the sunset. The sky stretched out before them, vast, endless, like the possibilities ahead. "I can't believe we're actually doing this," Emma said, her voice quiet as she took a deep breath. "It's all happening so fast." Olivia leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's what we wanted, though, isn't it?" "It's everything we've ever wanted," Emma replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. But despite their excitement, there was an underlying weight. Leaving home, leaving their father. Everything was changing so quickly. Their minds drifted. Back to those early mornings when their father would drive them to school, the sound of his truck's engine humming in the quiet morning air. He had worked so hard, sacrificed so much for them to get here. "What do you think Dad will say?" Olivia asked quietly. "I think he'll be proud," Emma answered, the same sense of determination in her voice. "He always believed in us." The following week they packed their bags, said their goodbyes and boarded a flight to San Francisco. 6 months later. The change was more than they had expected. The hustle of the city, the constant buzz of planes taking off and landing, the fast-paced environment. It was exhilarating, but it was also exhausting. The early mornings, the long days, the never-ending training sessions, but it felt like home. The first time they flew together on the new route, Olivia in the captain's seat and Emma as her first officer, something inside them clicked. The routine was familiar, but the weight of the responsibility was different. Now they were not just living their dream, they were pushing it forward. But with the new role came new challenges. There were days when the pressure seemed unbearable. Difficult. Weather conditions, tight schedules, stressed passengers, and a constant need to prove themselves in the face of seasoned pilots and higher expectations. There were times when Olivia would sit alone in the cockpit after a flight, running through the checklists, asking herself if she was good enough. If they were good enough. But Emma always knew how to pull her back. "You don't need to prove anything to anyone," Emma would say, her eyes warm with understanding. "We've already done the impossible." One particularly tough day they flew back to San Francisco from Denver after a turbulent flight. Olivia's hands were shaking as she took the plane in for landing. "You've got this," Emma said calmly from the co-pilot's seat. "Just breathe. You've done this 100 times. Olivia's heart slowed as she refocused, glancing at the landing strip just ahead. As the wheels touched down perfectly, she exhaled in relief, a huge smile breaking across her face. "Nice work, Captain," Emma teased as they taxied to the gate. "Don't get used to it," Olivia grinned, looking over at her twin. "You'll be back in that seat before you know it." As they disembarked, they were met by a group of senior pilots who had been watching the landing. One of them, a seasoned captain with graying hair and a gruff voice, clapped Olivia on the shoulder. "Good job, kid," he said. "You've got something rare. The steady hand of a veteran and the heart of a rookie. Don't ever lose that." The twins looked at each other, their smiles growing wider. They had come so far, and yet there was still so much ahead. They had worked hard, fought hard, and flown through every storm. But this was just the beginning. The call came early in the morning. Olivia had just finished a pre-flight checklist when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She looked at the screen and saw her father's name. Her heart skipped a beat. "Dad?" Olivia answered, her voice filled with immediate concern. But it wasn't her father. It was her mother, her voice trembling, weak from the other end of the line. "Liv, Emma, it's your dad. He's had another stroke. It's bad this time. We need you here." The world seemed to shift beneath Olivia's feet. Her hands went numb as she steadied herself against the cockpit door. It was the one thing she had feared most, their father's health. Every day that passed, the reality of his aging body, the sacrifices he had made for them, hung over their heads like a shadow. They had fought so hard to build their careers, but now it seemed the most important thing was slipping away from them. Without a word, Olivia turned to Emma, who was sitting in the co-pilot's seat ready for their next flight. "Emma, we need to go home. Now." Within hours, the twins were on a flight back to Ohio, the same place where their journey had started. The familiar landscape of cornfields, small towns, and rolling hills greeted them from the sky, but it was no longer the same. It felt different now, like the place they had once called home had faded into something less familiar, more distant. When they arrived at their childhood home, the smell of pine wood and the creak of the front door were enough to bring back a flood of memories. Their father had always kept the house in perfect order, every detail maintained just as it had been when they were kids, but now everything felt off. The house was quieter, more somber. Their mother, looking exhausted and strained, greeted them at the door, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Mom," Emma said, rushing to embrace her. "How's Dad?" Her mother's voice cracked. "He's in the hospital. He's stable for now, but they say it's worse than last time. The doctors aren't optimistic." The words hit them like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just the stroke. That had them worried. It was everything that had led up to this moment. The late nights when their father had worked too hard, the endless hours spent in his carpentry shop to make sure they had enough money to send them to school. All of it was catching up to him. They spent the next few hours in the hospital waiting for updates, feeling the weight of everything they had left behind in San Francisco. The planes, the flights, the dreams. But right now, nothing mattered, more than the man who had given up everything for them. Their father, Jack Johnson, was lying in the hospital bed, frail and barely recognizable, but still holding on. His once strong hands were now trembling, and his eyes, those same eyes, that had always been full of pride, now looked tired and unsure. The twins stood at his bedside, their emotions running wild. They had come so far, but it felt like everything had come to a halt in an instant. "Dad," Emma whispered, sitting beside him and taking his hand in hers. "We're here. We're right here." Jack's lips curled into a faint smile. His voice was weak but steady. "I knew you'd come, girls, I knew it." For the next few days, the twins stayed by their father's side. The flight training, the jobs, the world of aviation seemed so far away now. Their lives were rooted in this moment, in this room. With their family, their father's health remained in a fragile state, but in those quiet moments by his bedside, something inside them stirred. Their dad had sacrificed everything to make sure they could live out their dreams. But was it worth it if they couldn't be there for him when he needed them most? They had always promised him they would make him proud. But now, it was their turn to carry the weight of everything he had done for them. As the days passed, the decision became clear. Emma and Olivia sat outside in the hospital garden one evening, the sun setting on the horizon, casting an orange glow across the sky. "I can't leave him like this," Olivia said quietly. Her hands clasped in her lap, Emma nodded, her eyes lost in thought. "We don't have to. We've worked hard to get here, but we've also earned the right to be with our family when it matters. He needs us now." There was a quiet understanding between them. They both knew what had to be done. That night, they made a difficult phone call to West Coast Airlines. They explained the situation, their father's condition, and the decision to temporarily step away from their roles. Their supervisors were understanding, compassionate, and assured them that they could return whenever they were ready. The next day, the twins sat down with their mother, discussing the future. The time spent together as a family, supporting their father, was invaluable. But there was still uncertainty, still a world of dreams left unfulfilled. "We'll get through this," their mother said, though her voice was weary. "Your dad is a fighter, and so are you two." "We won't stop," Olivia replied. "We'll keep flying, but right now we're here. We're not going anywhere." In the days that followed, their father began to improve, slowly but steadily. It wasn't a miracle, but it was something to hold on to. Emma and Olivia took turns staying by his side, helping him with his recovery, and learning more about their father than they had in years. As the weeks passed, they realized something important. Family wasn't just the place you came from. It was the foundation you built on, no matter where you went. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace in their childhood home, Emma turned to Olivia. "You know, we've come a long way, haven't we?" she said, smiling. "From that little carpentry shop to this, it's not the end, it's just another chapter." Olivia nodded, her eyes shining. "Yeah, and it's one we can be proud of. Wherever we go next, we carry this with us. Always." The moment the plane touched down in San Francisco, Emma felt a rush of conflicting emotions. The city, her second home, her training ground, the place where she and Olivia had worked so hard to get to, now seemed like a distant dream. They had left behind their family, their father's health still fragile, and yet here they were, back to a world that had once felt so certain. But now everything felt different. They had spent several weeks in Ohio, taking care of their father, rebuilding those precious moments they had missed. Their father had been slowly recovering, gaining strength each day, but there was still a long road ahead of him. And in the quiet moments of reflection, Olivia and Emma had made a promise. They weren't just going to be pilots. They were going to be daughters, too. They couldn't just live for the dream. They had to live for the people who had gotten them here. The twins boarded a flight back to San Francisco with heavy hearts, but also with a sense of resolve. They had left their father behind for now, But they couldn't stay away forever. They had to go back to flying. They had worked too hard for too long to abandon their dreams now. As they walked off the plane, the familiar hum of the airport surrounded them, the rush of travelers, the echoes of announcements, the constant movement. It was like stepping back into the very essence of who they had become. And yet something felt different now. They weren't just part of the system anymore. They were the ones making the decisions, the ones who had to face challenges head on. Their first meeting with the senior team at West Coast Airlines was scheduled for the next day. When they arrived at the office, they were met with warm but formal greetings. The CEO, Harold Thompson, shook their hands with a tight smile. "Olivia, Emma, glad to have you both back," he said. "We've got some new opportunities coming up, but we're also dealing with some shifts in the industry. There's a lot of competition in the air, and we need pilots who are ready to adapt." Olivia felt the weight of his words. Adapt. The word hung in the air like a warning. "You've been given a lot of responsibility already," Harold continued, "but there's more on the horizon. If you're ready to move forward, you need to be prepared for a new direction. The airlines are expanding, and we're looking at diversifying routes, international flights, high-stakes situations. This is a chance for you both to prove yourselves." Emma exchanged a glance with Olivia. There it was, the opportunity to rise higher, to take the next step. But with that opportunity came an overwhelming pressure. "Of course, we're ready," Emma said, her voice steady. Olivia nodded in agreement. "We're committed to the job, whatever it takes." Over the next few weeks, Olivia and Emma threw themselves back into their training, harder than ever. The hours were longer, the flights were more challenging, and the stakes kept rising. Every day they felt the weight of their father's sacrifices, pushing them forward. But with all this new responsibility, there were moments when the pressure threatened to overwhelm them. Late nights, endless briefings, last-minute changes in routes. It was all part of the job. But Olivia couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the back of her mind that they had to find balance. The job couldn't be everything. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of training, Olivia and Emma sat together in their apartment, the city lights of San Francisco twinkling in the distance. "I think I'm starting to understand what Dad meant when he told us not to lose ourselves in the work," Olivia said, her voice quieter than usual. Emma looked at her sister, her eyes tired but focused. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Olivia paused, taking a deep breath. "When we were growing up, he worked so hard. He sold his carpentry shop, sacrificed everything for us. But sometimes I wonder if he ever regretted it. If he ever wished he had found time for himself, for us, when it was just us." Emma sighed, running her fingers through her hair. "I've thought about that too. But we didn't have a choice, did we? We couldn't have done it any other way. I know, but now I think we have to make sure we're not losing ourselves in this job. We've been given so much, but what happens when the dream doesn't feel like a dream anymore? What happens when it's just a job?" The silence between them lingered, both of them lost in their thoughts. The dream they had worked for, the dream they had shared since childhood, had brought them far. But in their pursuit, they had sometimes forgotten to stop and appreciate what they had achieved. The next morning, they got the call. Their next mission was an international flight to London. A new challenge, a new adventure, the opportunity to prove that they were ready for anything. But Olivia and Emma had made a decision. They weren't just going to prove their worth to the airlines or anyone else. They were going to prove to themselves that they could still be whole, that they could balance their dreams with the people they loved. As they walked through the terminal to board the plane, Emma turned to Olivia. "We're ready," she said, her eyes sparkling with confidence. "This is what we've trained for." Olivia smiled. "We're not just ready for the job. We're ready for everything. Together." As the plane soared into the sky, heading toward the unknown, Olivia and Emma knew one thing for certain. They were ready for the next step. Not just as pilots, but as daughters, sisters, and individuals who had worked to create a life they could be proud of, no matter what challenges came next. The flight to London was supposed to be routine. At least, that's what they had told themselves. They had been briefed, prepared, and were ready to take off. Olivia and Emma had flown countless international routes, faced minor hiccups along the way, but nothing ever truly prepared them for the storm that loomed ahead. It all started just as they were reaching cruising altitude, the hum of the engine steady and reassuring. Emma was in the cockpit with Olivia as usual. They worked together in perfect sync, each knowing exactly what the other was thinking. It was like breathing, natural, effortless. But as they reached the North Atlantic, things began to change. Light shake at first, a barely noticeable jolt, then another and another. Olivia glanced at the flight instruments. "That's unusual," she said, her voice calm but alert. The plane was shaking slightly, but not enough to trigger an alarm. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Emma adjusted the altitude slightly, her fingers hovering over the controls. "It could just be turbulence. We're in the right part of the world for it." But the bumps became more frequent and more violent, a sharp, sudden drop. The plane lurched in a way it hadn't before. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. "This isn't normal." She quickly switched on the communication system, connecting with the air traffic controller. "Tower, this is Flight 327. We're experiencing significant turbulence, requesting a status update on weather conditions ahead." The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "Flight 327, we're seeing severe storm activity near your route. Heavy winds, shifting pressures. You might be in for more turbulence, but stay in your altitude for now. We're rerouting you shortly." "Rerouting, is that even possible?" Emma asked, her brow furrowing as she glanced at Olivia. "We'll have to wait and see." Olivia kept her focus on the instruments, adjusting their heading slightly, making small corrections as they flew through the unsettled air. The turbulence was increasing. It wasn't the kind that just rattled the plane. This was sharp, jarring, enough to make their stomachs lurch. For the first time, they were both aware of just how serious the situation was. Olivia's mind raced. This wasn't the ordinary bumps of turbulence. This was something worse. Then a sudden deafening crack echoed through the cabin. The oxygen masks dropped. A cold rush of fear gripped Olivia's chest. She heard the muffled screams from the back of the plane. "Emma, we need to focus," Olivia snapped, trying to maintain composure. "Follow procedure. We need to level out." Emma's hands flew over the controls as she responded. "I'm doing what I can, but this is beyond our typical turbulence. We're going to need to descend soon to get below the storm." But as they descended, the storm's fury only intensified. The sky outside was a blur of dark clouds, flashes of lightning streaking across the black expanse. The cockpit felt smaller, more enclosed, as the wind howled against the fuselage. It was a test. Every pilot had imagined what it would be like to fly through a storm, but nothing could have truly prepared Olivia and Emma for the sheer power of nature they were facing now. The shaking was relentless. The plane was tossed like a toy in a storm of fury, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. "Call for backup," Olivia said. "We can't do this alone. Get Control Center on the line. We need a safe descent strategy." Emma tapped into the comm system again, her voice steady but edged with urgency. "Tower, this is Flight 327. We need backup assistance. We're encountering extreme turbulence, requesting emergency landing protocols and rerouting. Please advise." There was a pause, a faint crackle on the line before the tower's calm voice responded. "Flight 327, we see your request. Stand by. We're rerouting you to an alternate landing strip. We'll have emergency crews on standby. Hold tight. We've got you." The sound of the storm was deafening now, and the cabin felt like it was closing in around them. Olivia could barely hear herself think as the wind rattled against the cockpit windows. But in this chaos, one thing was clear. They had trained for moments like this. They had trained to remain calm, to think fast and make decisions under pressure. It was no longer about keeping the plane in the sky. It was about getting everyone through this. They descended. The turbulence didn't let up. "Keep it steady." "Emma," Olivia said, her voice tense but controlled. "We've got this." Emma nodded, her eyes fixed on the instruments. Steady as she goes. Minutes turned into hours. They finally saw the airport runway below, illuminated against the dark backdrop of the storm. Emergency lights flashed, guiding them in. "We're almost there," Olivia said, almost whispering to herself as much as to Emma. But as they neared the runway, another wave of turbulence hit. The plane bucked violently, and for a moment, the Ground seemed impossibly far away. Too much, Emma muttered under her breath. But then, with a final jolt, the plane's wheels touched the runway. It was rough, harder than any landing they had ever experienced, but they had made it. The relief was instantaneous. The storm still raged outside, but inside, they had conquered it. As the plane taxied to the gate, the passengers erupted into applause, some still visibly shaken, but all alive. Emma and Olivia exchanged a look, a silent, knowing look. They had done their job. They had kept everyone safe. In the aftermath, the storm passed, leaving only the echoes of its violence behind. The twins, though exhausted, knew they had faced their greatest test as pilots, and they had passed. Back in the crew room, as the adrenaline began to wear off, Emma turned to Olivia. "That was insane, but we did it." Olivia nodded, her heart still racing. "We did, together." As they reflected on the harrowing experience, a thought lingered in the back of Olivia's mind. The storm wasn't just a challenge they had weathered, it had been a reminder. In life, the turbulence was inevitable. But it was how you navigated it that mattered. They had chosen to stay steady. They had chosen to remain calm. And because of that, they had survived the storm, not just as pilots, but as sisters, as partners. The storm had passed, but its aftermath lingered. It had been one of the most intense moments of Olivia and Emma's careers, but it was far from over. The media was buzzing, the headlines screaming their names. Twin pilots survived the worst turbulence in decades. Interviews, press conferences, and cameras followed them everywhere, and for the first time, the twins found themselves facing scrutiny from more than just their superiors. The day after the storm, Olivia and Emma sat together in their hotel room. In London, the world outside still dark with the memory of the chaos that had unfolded. They were trying to rest, to regroup, but it was hard with the constant ringing of their phones and the flood of messages on social media. The world was watching them, and they had no idea how to respond. "Do you think we handled it well?" Emma asked, her voice soft as though she were afraid of the answer. Olivia didn't immediately respond. Instead, she stared out the window, the lights of the city shimmering against the fading storm clouds. She thought about the plane shaking, the pressure of knowing lives were in their hands, and the way they had fought against fear to bring the passengers home. "I think we did what we had to do," Olivia said finally. "We stayed calm. We made the right decisions, but I think we're being held to a standard we didn't ask for. We were just doing our jobs." Emma exhaled sharply. "I know, but it feels like people expect us to be perfect, like we can't make a mistake." "That's the reality now," Olivia said, rubbing her temples. "After the storm, we're not just pilots anymore, we're symbols. We're examples of what happens when you do everything right. But that's not always the case. The following week was a blur. The media coverage intensified as interviews were scheduled, and Olivia and Emma found themselves answering questions from reporters, trying to keep their cool in the face of intrusive questions about their personal lives and their family. The twins hadn't anticipated how much of a spectacle their lives would become. They had always been private people, never seeking the spotlight. But now it felt as if their every move was being scrutinized. "Why did you go back to Ohio?" one reporter asked during a live interview. "What's the real reason behind the sudden return? Was it just about your father's health?" The question was pointed, and Olivia could feel the weight of it hanging in the air. But she remained calm, giving an answer that reflected their values. "It's about family," Olivia said. "We've spent years chasing our dreams, but when your family needs you, you put everything else aside." Despite the media frenzy, Olivia and Emma tried to return to their training and flight schedules, but every decision, every action was now viewed through a different lens. Their every move was under a microscope, and they could sense the growing pressure from their colleagues and supervisors. Some admired them for their bravery, others whispered about the risks they had taken. One morning, after yet another tense meeting with the senior leadership at West Coast Airlines, Emma couldn't hold back her frustration anymore. "I'm so tired of this," she said, slamming the door of the office shut behind her. "We're just trying to do our jobs, and all they care about is how they can capitalize on what happened. We didn't ask for this attention, and now it feels like we're stuck in this PR circus." Olivia, who had followed her sister into The hallway leaned against the wall, watching her for a moment. She understood Emma's anger. She felt it too, the tension, the pressure, the constant feeling of being on display. It was exhausting. "Let's just get through the next few weeks," Olivia said. "Then we can make some decisions about what comes next." But deep down, Olivia wasn't sure what came next. They had both worked so hard to get to this point, but now it seemed as though the path they were on had become clouded by external expectations and an unrelenting demand for perfection. 2 days later, Olivia and Emma sat together in a small cafe near the airport. They were waiting for their next flight, a short one to Los Angeles for another round of interviews. They had been quiet for the last few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts, the pressure weighing heavily on them. Finally, Emma broke the silence. "Do you ever feel like we've lost control of everything?" Olivia looked at her sister, the question striking a chord with her. "Yeah. Sometimes it feels like we're just going through the motions, living up to other people's ideas of who we should be. I mean, we're pilots, right? We're supposed to fly, to be in control of the plane, of our destiny," Emma continued. "But now it feels like we're passengers in someone else's story, and I don't know how to get out of it." Olivia nodded slowly. "I get it. But remember why we started, why Dad made the sacrifices he did. We did all of this to be free, to be independent. We didn't ask for fame, we didn't ask for recognition. We did it because we loved flying." There was a moment of silence as they both reflected on their father's sacrifices. He had worked tirelessly to give them the chance to live out their dreams. But now it seemed like their dreams were at risk of being overshadowed by the very thing they had worked so hard to avoid: the spotlight. That evening, after the final round of interviews, Olivia and Emma sat in their hotel room once again. It was late, and the buzz of the city outside had quieted, leaving only the sound of their own breathing. "I think we need a break," Emma said suddenly. Olivia looked at her, eyebrows raised. "A break? From flying?" "Yeah. I mean, maybe we need to step away for a bit," Emma said. "We've been pushing so hard for so long, but maybe it's time to reevaluate everything. What's really important?" Olivia paused, considering her sister's words. The truth was, she had been thinking the same thing. Maybe it was time to step back, to take a breath, and to find a new balance between their careers and their personal lives. "You're right," Olivia finally said. "Maybe we do need a break. We need to remember who we are before all of this started, before the pressure and the expectations." As they sat together in the quiet of their hotel room, the weight of their decisions hanging in the air, Olivia and Emma realized something important. They didn't have to be defined by anyone else's narrative. They were more than just pilots, more than just the twins who survived the storm. They were women who had a choice, and they were going to make it. The decision to take a break wasn't easy. It never was for Olivia and Emma. Both had been raised with the understanding that ambition was a virtue, that success was something to be chased at all costs. But now, sitting together in their hotel room, they realized something. The very thing they had worked so hard for was starting to feel like a cage. Over the next few weeks, Olivia and Emma spent time away from the media frenzy, away from the endless interviews, and away from the constant pressure. They decided to take a personal trip, just the two of them, back to their childhood home in Ohio. It was a place that had always grounded them, where the noise of the world seemed miles away. As they stood in the front yard of their old house, the wind picking up and rustling through the trees, they realized just how much they missed the simplicity of their beginnings, the familiar sights of their hometown, the old fence they used to jump over, the neighborhood where their father had taught them to ride bikes and fix things. "I missed this," Emma said quietly, staring at the house. "I missed the peace of it. I think I forgot what it felt like to just be ordinary." Olivia nodded, her gaze softening. "We were just kids here. We didn't have to live up to anyone's expectations. We just lived, and it was enough." The twins sat on the porch steps, the old wooden planks creaking beneath them. The house, though worn and weathered with time, held the same sense of warmth it always had. They spent hours talking, reminiscing, and realizing that the world they had built for themselves in the sky was, in many ways, very different from the life they had once known. The following days were spent in quiet reflection. Olivia and Emma walked through the town, stopping by the old bakery they used to visit after school, now run by a new owner. They passed their old high school, where they had spent so many years dreaming of the future. The small-town pace was a far cry from the high-pressure world of aviation, and they soaked it all in. It was during one of these walks, as they made their way through the town's small park, that Olivia turned to Emma with a thought that had been growing in her mind. "Do you think we've been running away from something?" Olivia asked, the question feeling heavier than she anticipated. Emma gave her a curious glance. "Running away from what?" "I don't know," Olivia said slowly. Maybe we've been running away from the idea of who we were before. All of this, before the fame, before the storms, when we were just two girls with a dream. Now it feels like we've lost sight of who we really are." Emma stopped walking, letting the breeze lift her hair as she thought about her sister's words. "I think you're right. I've been so focused on proving we can do this, that we can handle the pressure, that I've forgotten why we started. It wasn't about the attention. It was about the love for flying, the freedom we had in the air." Olivia smiled softly, the weight of her sister's words settling in her heart. "Maybe it's time to start over. Maybe it's time to focus on the things that matter. Family, our dreams, the reasons we got into this in the first place." Emma looked out across the park, her expression thoughtful. "But that's scary, isn't it? We've built a life that people admire, a career that everyone looks up to. Walking away from it, it feels like we're giving up something we worked so hard for." Olivia placed a hand on her sister's shoulder, her voice steady, but full of understanding. "It's not giving up. It's just taking a step back. We don't have to keep climbing if it's not the climb we want anymore. We've already reached the top. Now, we just need to decide where we want to go next." By the time they returned to California, Olivia and Emma had made up their minds. They would take a leave of absence from West Coast Airlines. They would focus on what really mattered, their families, their friendships, and their own personal growth. They needed to redefine success on their own terms, not based on what others expected of them. They knew that taking this break would not be easy. The aviation world, like any high-pressure field, would not look kindly on their decision. But for the first time in years, they felt a sense of clarity. They were no longer just pilots. They were women with the power to choose their path. A few days later, Olivia sat in the living room of their modest California home, the walls lined with family photos and mementos from their travels. Emma was on the phone with their mum, talking about plans for the coming weeks. The twins had promised to visit their father, who was still living in Ohio, to spend time with him and catch up on everything that had changed. Olivia smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over her as she looked around. This was home. Not the fame, not the endless flights, just the moments that mattered. That evening, Emma walked in and sat down beside her. "I think we made the right choice," she said, looking at her sister with a sense of relief. "I feel like we can finally breathe again." Olivia nodded, her smile reflecting the calmness she felt. "I do too. It's funny, isn't it? We spent so much time flying high, but we never really stopped to look at what we were leaving behind." "We don't have to leave it behind, though," Emma said, her voice full of conviction. "We can take the best parts of it with us. We just need to make sure we're in the driver's seat from here on out." The next few weeks passed in a blur of family time, personal reflection, and a deepening sense of contentment. Olivia and Emma started to explore new opportunities, teaching young aspiring pilots, attending flight safety seminars, and spending time working on passion projects that had taken a back seat to their careers. They found themselves rediscovering their love for flying, not as a job, but as a joy. They found peace in the simplicity of their work, in helping others achieve the same dreams they once had. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Olivia and Emma sat on the porch of their home, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the sky. "It's strange," Emma said, her voice soft. "We've always been in control of the plane, but now I feel like we're in control of our lives again." Olivia smiled, reaching out to squeeze her sister's hand. "Yeah, we're still flying, just on our terms." The decision to step back from their high-profile careers in aviation had been an unexpected yet liberating one. Olivia and Emma had spent years chasing their dreams, rising to the top of their field, but now they had come to realize that their dreams weren't necessarily defined by the expectations of others. As they spent time with family and began to rediscover their passions, the world around them felt a little less overwhelming. But the twins knew that they couldn't ignore their love for aviation forever. The pull of the skies, the thrill of flying, and the bond they shared as pilots, it was too ingrained in them to simply let go. It was one bright morning in early autumn when the phone rang. The call came from an unexpected source, their old mentor, Captain Grace Lawson. She had been a guiding figure in their early years at West Coast Airlines, a seasoned pilot who had always believed in their potential, pushing them to be better, to aim higher. "Olivia, Emma, how are you girls doing?" Captain Lawson's voice crackled through the receiver, her tone warm but laced with urgency. "I've been following your break from the spotlight, and I can't say I blame you. But listen, I've got an opportunity that might be exactly what you're looking for. Are you two ready for something new?" The mention of new sparked something in both Olivia and Emma. They exchanged a quick glance. "What kind of opportunity?" Olivia asked. Captain Lawson paused for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "There's a program I'm heading up, a mentorship initiative for young pilots in remote areas. It's a non-profit, and we're looking for experienced pilots to join the team. We've been struggling to find the right people, and I think you two would be perfect." Olivia felt her pulse quicken at the thought of flying again, but this time with a different purpose. "A mentorship program for young pilots? Remote areas?" "Yes," Captain Lawson responded. "We're focusing on areas with limited access to aviation. Rural towns, small islands, places that need help with transportation and logistics, and we want to make sure these communities have access to quality pilots who can train the next generation. It's a different kind of flying, a different kind of challenge. No press conferences, no flashing cameras, just you, the sky, and the people you're helping." The idea seemed to settle like a spark in their hearts. Olivia and Emma had always loved helping others. This was an opportunity that allowed them to use their skills without the pressure of public scrutiny. The thought of getting back into the EIF cockpit, doing what they loved while also making a tangible difference, was incredibly appealing. "I think we'd love to hear more," Emma said, her voice filled with curiosity and excitement. A week later, Olivia and Emma found themselves at a small nondescript airport just outside of Oregon, where Captain Lawson had organized a meeting with the non-profit's leadership. They were introduced to a diverse group of seasoned pilots, administrators, and volunteers, people who, like them, had once been caught up in the high-flying world of commercial aviation, but had decided to take their skills and knowledge to places that needed them most. After hours of discussion about the logistics of the program and the details of the work involved, Olivia and Emma were sold. This wasn't just about flying. This was about giving back to the communities they had once passed over in their rush for success. The first few months of their new venture were filled with excitement, but also with challenges. Olivia and Emma flew across various states, sometimes landing on makeshift runways in small towns or isolated islands. They trained young pilots, taught them about the fundamentals of flying, and mentored them as they learned to navigate both the skies and their new surroundings. They spent time in places they never expected, teaching local women how to fly, helping communities access medical supplies and food, and even working with schools to inspire the next generation of aviators. The work was rewarding, and as they looked at the smiling faces of those they were helping, they knew they had made the right decision. But as fulfilling as their new lives were, the twins couldn't ignore the fact that their family and friends were beginning to notice the changes in them. One evening, after a long day of training in a remote area of Washington state, Olivia and Emma sat together by a campfire. The sky above them was endless, speckled with stars. The crackling fire provided the only warmth as the chill of the night set in. Emma picked up a stick, poking at the embers as she spoke. "Do you think Mom and Dad are worried about us?" she asked, the question lingering in the quiet night. Olivia thought for a moment before responding. "Maybe. They've always supported us, but I think they were hoping we'd come back to a more traditional life, you know? Settle down. But we're doing something good, Emma." We're making a difference. I know, Emma replied, but it's hard sometimes feeling so far away from everyone. I mean, I miss Ohio, I miss the old routine. But when I see the difference we're making, when I see these kids learning to fly, it feels like everything we've worked for was worth it. The fire flickered as they both sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their decisions settling in. I'm glad we're doing this, Olivia finally said, her voice steady and sure. I don't think we could ever go back to what we were doing before, not after this. Months passed and Olivia and Emma grew into their new roles. The work was demanding, sometimes grueling, but the rewards were immeasurable. They began to see real progress in the young pilots they were mentoring, and each time they saw one of their students take off into the sky on their own, it felt like a victory. Their work also started to make headlines, but this time it was different. The media wasn't interested in sensationalizing their lives or focusing on their mistakes. Instead, they told the story of two women who had found a new purpose, one that was grounded in the community and in the very essence of aviation: helping others. One evening, while sitting in a small diner with Captain Lawson after a long day of flying, Olivia couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment wash over her. It was a quiet moment, away from the press and the expectations, and for the first time in a long time, Olivia felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. You know, Captain Lawson said, sipping her coffee, I think you two have found something special here, not just in aviation, but in life. Emma smiled across the table, her eyes reflecting the warmth of the moment. Yeah, I think we have. After months of working in remote areas, Olivia and Emma had grown accustomed to the solitude and simplicity of their new lives. They had settled into their roles as mentors, their days filled with training young pilots and helping isolated communities with essential supplies. The peace of their work, coupled with the satisfaction of making a difference, had allowed them to rediscover themselves in ways they hadn't anticipated. But no matter how far they traveled, there was one thing they couldn't escape: the pull of family. It had been months since they had seen their parents in Ohio, and despite the meaningful work they were doing, a part of them missed the familiarity of home. The longing to see their family, especially their father, began to weigh on them. So they made a decision. It was time to return, time to reconnect with the roots that had shaped them, the family that had supported them through every step of their journey. Their flight back to Ohio was calm, the vast stretches of land below them a comforting reminder of how far they had come. Olivia sat in the cockpit, her hands on the controls, while Emma sat beside her reading through some notes for their upcoming mentorship sessions. It was a strange feeling, returning to a place they hadn't been to in so long, a place that held so many memories of their childhood. As they descended toward the small airport in their hometown, Olivia couldn't help but notice how much had changed. The town had grown, new buildings dotted the landscape, and familiar streets were lined with stores they didn't recognize. Yet despite the changes, the heart of the town was still the same. It still felt like home. When they arrived at their parents' house, the warmth of their family's embrace was exactly what they needed. Their mother, Jennifer, opened the door with a wide smile, her face lighting up when she saw her twin daughters standing on the porch. "Girls, you're home," she exclaimed, pulling them into a tight hug. "I can't believe it. Look at you both. You look so different, but so happy." Their father, George, was right behind her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and nostalgia. "I thought you girls might have forgotten where you came from," he teased, his voice deep and familiar. Olivia and Emma exchanged a look, both feeling the weight of the moment. They had come so far, yet this was where it all began. Their father had sold his carpentry shop to send them to school, had sacrificed so much to ensure they had every opportunity to succeed, and now here they were, back in the place that had shaped their dreams. "Never forgotten, Dad," Emma said with a grin, giving him a hug. "Just needed a little time to find ourselves again." Over the next few days, the twins settled back into the rhythm of family life. They spent time with their parents, reliving old memories and catching up on everything that had happened since they left. It was a bittersweet reunion. They were happy to be home, but they couldn't ignore the fact that they had changed. They were no longer the young girls who dreamed of flying. They were seasoned pilots, women with stories of their own, and lives that felt so different from the small-town existence they had once known. Their father, ever the practical man, didn't ask too many questions about their new life. Instead, he focused on how proud he was of the work they were doing. He knew deep down that their choice to return to the skies for something greater had been the right one. "You've made a difference, haven't you?" George asked one evening, as the family sat around the dinner table. Olivia nodded. "We have. We're teaching young pilots how to fly, helping communities that don't have access to aviation. It's more than just a job for us now. It's about making sure others can have the same opportunities we had." George gave a satisfied grunt. "I always knew you two were special, but hearing you talk about it like this, it makes all the sacrifices worth it." Jennifer, always the supportive mother, smiled at her daughters. "I'm proud of both of you. You've turned your dreams into something real, something that's helping others." But despite the pride and the warmth of family, there was still an underlying tension. Olivia and Emma couldn't ignore the fact that their family had envisioned a different path for them. Their mother, especially, had hoped they would settle into a quieter life. "Have you thought about coming back here? Maybe finding something local to do?" Jennifer asked, her voice gentle, as she poured them both a cup of tea in the living room. "You don't have to keep chasing these big dreams." Olivia and Emma exchanged an uneasy glance. It wasn't that they didn't love their parents, or that they didn't long for the sense of stability they had once taken for granted. It was just that their new life, their purpose, felt more aligned with who they were now. But how could they explain that to their mother without making her feel like they were abandoning the family? "Mom, we're happy," Olivia said quietly. "We've found something that means more to us than anything we could have imagined, but we'll always be here for you, and we're always going to be your daughters." Jennifer nodded, though there was a hint of worry in her eyes. "I understand," she said, though the words sounded a little uncertain. "I just don't want you two to feel like you have to keep going so far away. I want to know you're okay." Emma squeezed her mother's hand, her voice firm but kind. "We're more than okay, Mom. We're the happiest we've ever been." As the days passed, Olivia and Emma began to realize something. The pressure to conform to their family's expectations wasn't something they needed to carry anymore. They had grown, evolved, and found their own path. But that didn't mean they didn't love their family. It didn't mean they didn't care about their parents' hopes for them. It just meant that they had to live their truth. In the end, their return to Ohio had been more than just a visit. It had been a reminder of where they came from, a grounding force that allowed them to reconcile their past with their present. The love and support of their parents would always be a part of them, but so would the love they had for flying, for teaching, and for helping others achieve their own dreams. After their visit to Ohio, Olivia and Emma had returned to their work in the mentorship program with a renewed sense of purpose. The time spent with their parents had been healing, but it had also forced them to confront the deeper emotions tied to their past, their roots, and the complex dynamic between family and personal fulfillment. Back in the familiar rhythm of flying over remote landscapes, the twins continued their work, teaching young pilots who shared their passion for aviation. But they couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. As much as they had embraced the quiet, fulfilling life of mentorship, the distance from their parents and the town they once called home weighed heavily on them. It was during one of their rare quiet moments, as they sat in a small cafe in the mountains, that they decided it was time to bridge the gap between their new life and their family. "We need to go back, Em," Olivia said, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "Not just for a visit, we need to stay for a while. Our parents need to know that we're okay. They need to see that we've found our place in this world." Emma looked up from her notebook, where she had been jotting down some flight routes. "I agree, but it's not just about visiting. We've been running around the country for so long. Maybe we should settle down for a bit. Let them see the life we've built here, not just the one they imagined for us." "I think it's more than that," Olivia replied, her voice thoughtful. "We need to show them that this life we've chosen is the right one for us, and that doesn't mean abandoning them or forgetting where we came from. It means we've grown and we've found our way, and we want them to understand that." It didn't take long for Olivia and Emma to make plans for a more extended visit home. They decided to fly to Ohio once again, but this time they would stay for a month, really immersing themselves in family life. They wanted to show their parents that they could have both, the adventure of their work and the stability of family connections. As they landed at the familiar small airport near their parents' house, they were greeted with the same warmth that had filled their hearts the last time they were home. This time, though, they arrived with a deeper sense of purpose. They weren't just coming to visit, they were coming to share their journey, to explain their path, and to prove that they had found fulfillment in a way that was uniquely their own. Their parents, especially their father George, were thrilled to see them again. But this time there was a difference. There was an eagerness in their eyes, a hopefulness that hadn't been there before. It seemed as though they were finally beginning to understand that their daughters had found something special. The first few days back in Ohio were spent reconnecting with family, reminiscing about old times, and taking walks through the quiet town. Olivia and Emma had grown used to the fast pace of life on the road, the long flights, and the constant hustle of their aviation careers. But being home, surrounded by familiar faces and the peaceful landscape, was a grounding experience. It gave them space to breathe and reflect on everything they had accomplished and everything they still wanted to do. One evening after dinner, George asked if they wanted to take a walk down the old main street of the town. They agreed, and as they walked together under the soft glow of streetlights, their father turned to them with a look of quiet pride. "You know, girls," George began, his voice steady, "I've been thinking a lot about how far you two have come, and I've realized something. It's not about what kind of life you lead, it's about being true to yourselves." Olivia and Emma exchanged a look, their hearts swelling with emotion at their father's words. "We've always been proud of you," George continued, "but it wasn't until now that I fully understood what you've done. You've built a life that's your own, and I'm proud of that." Jennifer, who had been walking beside them, nodded in agreement. "You've made something of yourselves, in a way we could never have imagined, and seeing you so happy, so fulfilled, that's all we've ever wanted." The words hung in the air, and for the first time, Olivia and Emma felt a weight lift off their shoulders. Their parents understood. They understood that this life, this path they had chosen, wasn't just a job, and it was a calling. It wasn't about following a traditional route. It was about creating something that mattered, something that spoke to who they were. As the weeks passed, Olivia and Emma settled into the rhythm of family life, but they knew their time at home was limited. Their responsibilities in the mentorship program called them back to the skies. But this time, as they prepared to leave, there was no guilt, no feeling of abandonment. They had bridged the gap between their old life and their new one, and they were at peace. Before they left, their mother pulled them aside, her hands resting gently on their shoulders. "I don't always understand everything about what you do, but I see the difference you're making," Jennifer said softly. "I see the way you're helping others, and that means the world to me." "We'll always come back, Mom," Emma reassured her, her voice firm. "We'll always be here for you, but this is our journey now, and we're taking it one step at a time." Jennifer smiled, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know, sweetie. I know. Just promise me you'll always remember where you came from." "Course we will," Olivia said, hugging her mother tightly. "We'll never forget." As the twins boarded the plane and prepared for their next flight, they felt a sense of peace that had been missing for years. They had reconciled their past with their present, and they had finally come to terms with the fact that they could create their own path. One that blended their love for aviation, their desire to help others, and their deep bond with their family. Their journey was far from over, but as they took to the skies once again, they knew they were on the right track. The winds were strong as the plane cut through the clouds. The familiar hum of the engine, a comforting background to the whirlwind of thoughts that raced through Olivia and Emma's minds. They had just left Ohio again. A bittersweet departure, but one that felt different from the last. They had gone, home to their roots, and in doing so had stitched together the pieces of their past with the tapestry of their present. Now as they flew across the skies, they reflected on everything they had accomplished, everything they had yet to achieve, and the legacy they were creating. Sitting beside her twin sister in the cockpit, Emma looked out the window, lost in thought. The vast expanse of land beneath them seemed endless, and for a moment she felt the weight of it all, the responsibility, the accomplishments, and the dreams still to be realized. "Olivia," Emma said quietly, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the plane, "do you ever think about what our legacy will be, what we're really leaving behind?" Olivia glanced over at her, a slight frown furrowing her brow. "What do you mean?" "I mean—" Emma hesitated, as though gathering her thoughts. "We've done so much already, but sometimes I wonder if we're really making a difference. We're helping teach these young pilots, training them to fly and navigate in difficult terrain. But will they remember us? Will they carry the lessons we've taught them into their own futures?" Olivia turned her gaze to the horizon, contemplating her sister's words. It was true. The impact they were having on the world was significant, but it wasn't something that would always be visible. Most of the work they did was behind the scenes, training pilots, delivering essential supplies to remote communities, and supporting the next generation of aviators. But would it be enough? "I think about that sometimes too," Olivia said, her voice thoughtful. "But you know what? I think the legacy isn't just about what people remember about us. It's about the change we inspire in others. It's about them carrying our lessons forward." Emma nodded slowly, her fingers tapping on the dashboard. "That's true. It's not about the recognition. It's about doing what's right even when no one's watching." The twins' work, though meaningful and fulfilling, was not without its challenges. They were constantly on the move, flying from one mission to another, encountering unexpected weather, difficult landing conditions, and sometimes even harsh environments that tested both their physical and emotional limits. But despite the hurdles, Olivia and Emma had never lost sight of why they did it. They were changing lives, one flight at a time. But as they reflected on their legacy, there was something else that weighed on them, something more personal. Their parents' sacrifices, their father's decision to sell the carpentry shop, their mother's quiet support and unspoken worry. They had given up everything for their daughter's education and dreams. Now it was time to think about what kind of legacy they would leave their parents, the people who had believed in them when no one else did. The twins spent the following months planning a new project, one that would be a true tribute to their parents' sacrifices. They decided to launch a scholarship program for young men and women from small towns like theirs, a program that would allow them to pursue careers in aviation just as they had. They wanted to ensure that the opportunity for a better future would be available to others, just as it had been for them. They put the wheels in motion, reaching out to foundations, schools, and corporations who might be interested in supporting the initiative. It wasn't going to be easy, but they knew they had to make it happen. This was their chance to give back to the community that had raised them and to honor the love and sacrifices their parents had made. As the program slowly gained traction, Olivia and Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. It wasn't about making headlines or receiving awards. It was about creating an enduring impact, an opportunity for others to follow in their footsteps, to build their own legacies, and to make a difference in the world. They also continued their mentorship work, but now it had a deeper meaning. They were no longer just teaching young pilots how to navigate difficult skies. They were teaching them the importance of perseverance, of following their dreams, of giving back. Every lesson, every word of encouragement became part of something bigger than themselves. One evening, after a particularly long day of training and paperwork, Olivia and Emma sat together on the porch of their small rented cabin in the mountains. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the landscape. It was a peaceful moment, one they had come to cherish. "You know, Em," Olivia said, her voice soft, "I think we've finally done it. We've found a way to honor everything our parents did for us." Emma smiled, her eyes bright with pride. "Yeah, we have. We've made a difference, and we're going to keep making one." Olivia took a deep breath, a sense of calm settling over her. "It's funny, you know, when we were younger I thought the legacy we were building was all about success and achievement, but now I see that it's more about the people we've touched along the way. It's about the next generation and the difference they can make." Emma nodded, her gaze turning to the horizon. We've built something. And it's not just for us, it's for everyone who believes in the power of dreams. And so, as the days turned into years, Olivia and Emma continued to lead by example. Their scholarship program flourished, bringing new opportunities to countless aspiring aviators. Their mentorship program expanded, reaching more remote communities and giving young pilots the tools they needed to thrive. They continued to live out their passion for aviation, knowing that every flight, every lesson, every moment of their journey was helping to shape the future. Their legacy wasn't just about the planes they flew or the lives they touched directly. It was about the values they instilled in others, the belief in perseverance, the importance of family, and the power of sacrifice for a greater cause. As they looked back on everything they had accomplished, Olivia and Emma knew that their journey had just begun. They had taken the leap, just as their father had once taken the risk to send them to school, and in doing so had built a life that would continue to inspire others for generations to come. And when they returned home, to Ohio, to their parents, to the town that had nurtured them, they could finally say with certainty that the legacy they had created was not just theirs. It was a gift to everyone who had ever believed in them.